In section 5 here, we're going to talk about a different kind of logarithm called a natural log and something called base E. And base E is this right here. E is approximately 2.7182182 and it goes on forever. And it is the second most common irrational number that we use in math behind pi, which is 3.1. Well, we use 3.14, but it's an irrational number, that decimal that goes on forever. The most common use of natural logs, this base E, is by banks when interest is compounded continuously. Okay. A natural log then is a logarithm that uses E as its base. And we don't use log to stand for that log. So if you look right down here, we've got this right here. If we have the log and our base is base E of something, and I'm using an X, we don't write it as log, we write it as ln. Okay, and that's the abbreviation they use for natural logs. I know that seems kind of backwards. You'd think it would be NL. Okay, and I kind of write it this way as a cursive L. So ln is natural log. And you're going to see these buttons on your calculator, either ln or sometimes the calculators will use both capital ln for natural log. Okay, and we don't usually put the base down here, but it's understood to be base E when we do that. Well, when we solve some of these equations that have base E and natural logs, you're going to kind of think of it that way. So to this. Now, one thing that is true, because natural logs are still logarithms, all logarithm properties that we've already looked at, and so let me just write that up here. So all log properties apply also to natural logs. So those three properties that we looked at for log logs apply to natural logs as well. And we're going to use that as we start to solve some of these equations involving natural logs. Use logarithm properties. So if you look here, and we'll do number 1 first. So I've got this ln of 2x squared minus ln of 2. So the natural log of 2x squared minus the natural log of 2 is equal to 2. So if you look at what you're doing, that's two different logarithms on that side. And if you think back to one of the properties, when we're subtracting logs, we write it as a quotient or division. So I want to get this side right here, let me make this a little bit bigger, as a single natural log. So I'm going to write it as ln, and I have to take this and divide by this. So it's 2x squared over 2. Okay, because it's subtracting, so we put it as a quotient. That's the logarithm property, is equal to 2. Now, you can kind of think of it this way. I can reduce inside of here. These 2's are canceling, so I really have the ln of x squared is equal to 2. And I'll go ahead and keep that in parentheses. Now, we don't have a natural log on the other side. And if you think back to when we did log logs, sometimes we had logs on both sides. Here we don't. So we kind of, it's back to when you had this. If I had the log of 25 in base 5, well, what went in the empty box? Well, we said 25 was equal to 5 to what power went in the empty box. Well, now we got to think of this as it's a natural log, so that means this is base E. So we're going to basically write this in exponential form. We're going to say, well, that has to equal the base, which is E, to this power. So that's going to go up here and become the exponent on E squared. Now, you can't think of this like a variable, okay? E squared is that number, 2.7, whatever it was. So what we really have to do is we need to take the square root of both sides here. So I'm going to take the square root. Now that doesn't just leave you with e, okay? Because e is not a variable. It is that number, that irrational number, a little over 2.7. So we're going to say x equals, and we're doing the square root, so it's positive and negative. And if you do e squared on your calculator, and if you find the ln button on your calculator, the e button is usually right above it with a second or shift key. So if I do e squared, and really we're taking that number a little more than 2.7 and squaring it, it's the square root of 7.3891, and I'll go to 4 decimal places. So now we go ahead and we take the square root of that. So it's positive and negative, and it's about 2.7182. Now I could write it as, and we just have to check these and make sure they still work, and notice the only thing was with this x squared, so it's okay to have a, because when we square a positive or square a negative, it's going to end up being a natural log of a positive number, and that works out. Now you could leave it this way, or you could write it as two separate ones, 2.7182, and then negative 2.7182.